I came back to Portland after 8 years away to care for my dying sister. I dreamed of finally holding my 5-year-old granddaughter, Lily, and seeing my daughter, Laura, happy in the peaceful home my late husband and I had poured our hearts into buying for her. But as I gently pushed open the door, the first sound that greeted me wasn't laughter. It was the ice-cold voice of my son-in-law, echoing from the living room. "There's still a smudge on the floor. Clean it again. Don't make me tell you twice." I froze. There, in the living room, my daughter, a gifted potter, was on her hands and knees, scrubbing at an invisible spot on the floor. She was wearing a coarse, frayed apron, like the uniform of a housemaid from a bygone century. When she saw me, her smile was strained, and her eyes were filled with fear. They had turned my daughter into a slave, a ghost in her own home. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't confront them, but I swore, right then and there, that I would make them pay, using the only weapons an old librarian has: silence and a perfect plan. My name is Susan Miller, 66 years old, and this is the story of how I won back my daughter's life, right here in this misty city of Portland. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to listen to more meaningful life stories with us. Your support is our biggest motivation to keep sharing. 8 years. 8 long, achingly long years. That's a lifetime when you're counting the days, the hours, to go home. The cross-country train crawled along, carrying me away from the humid heat and endless palm trees of Florida, pulling me closer to the misty rain and the lush green of Portland, Oregon. For 8 years, I'd lived in a parallel world, a world of sterile white hospital rooms, the steady beep of heart monitors, and whispered conversations at my only sister's bedside. But that chapter was closed now. My sister had passed peacefully, and I, Susan Miller, at 66 years old, was finally returning to my own life, returning to what mattered most, to my daughter Laura, and to my little granddaughter Lily, whom I'd only ever seen through the blurry screen of a phone. As the train's wheels screeched to a halt at Union Station, a familiar ache of homecoming filled my chest. The Portland air greeted me with a damp embrace, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and the faint perfume of pine from distant forests. It was the smell of home. I pulled my single suitcase, a testament to 8 years of temporary living, and stepped out of the station. Everything felt both the same and completely different. The grand red brick building was still there, its clock tower still standing proud against the silvery gray sky, but the crowds bustled with new faces, new stories. I found a taxi, settled into the back seat, and gave the driver my daughter's address. It was an address I could recite in my sleep: 214 Cherry Park Street, a peaceful name for a quiet street where charming craftsman-style homes nestled under ancient maple trees. My husband, Daniel, had fallen in love with this street at first sight. "This is where our Laura will build her life, Susan," he'd said, his eyes shining with pride. "A place quiet enough for her to create, safe enough for her children to play." My Daniel was an architect, a man who saw the world in lines and structures, but his heart was full of poetry. He was gone too soon, just a year before Laura met Kevin, but his legacy, his love, was still there, wrapped up in the house we'd used our life savings to buy for our girl. The taxi glided over the wet streets. I gazed out the window, memories playing like an old film. There was Laurelhurst Park, where Laura learned to ride her bike, her knees always scraped but her laughter never ending. There was Powell's Books, where she could lose herself for hours among the pages. That's who my Laura was, a vibrant, free-spirited artist. She had the hands of an angel, able to turn lifeless lumps of clay into beautiful pottery, each vase, each bowl telling its own story. I had pictured her house on Cherry Park filled with her creations, a living gallery of her talent and passion. For 8 years, our video calls had always been rushed. Laura always said everything was fine. "I'm doing okay, Mom. Kevin's getting promotions at work. Lily is such a good girl." Her voice was always flat, and her face on the screen always looked tired. I told myself it was just the stress of managing a family, of raising a young child. From 1,000 miles away, I chose to believe her, because to imagine otherwise would have been a burden too heavy to bear. I clung to the image of a happy family, the fulfilling life I'd always wanted for her, just to give myself the strength to care for my dying sister. "We're almost there, ma'am." The driver's voice pulled me back to the present. The car turned onto Cherry Park Street. My heart began to beat faster. And then, there it was. Number 214. Just as graceful as I remembered. The moss-green siding, the crisp white window frames, and the wide front porch with the wooden swing Daniel had built with his own hands. The front lawn was perfectly manicured, not a weed in sight. A few rose bushes were in full bloom, their creamy white petals looking impossibly perfect. It was a picture of flawlessness, almost too perfect to be real. I paid the cab driver, pulled my suitcase up the stone walkway, and took a deep breath. I was home. I had my own key, a copy Laura had given me years ago. I wanted to give her a little surprise. Gently, I slipped the key into the lock. The heavy oak door swung open in silence. "Laura, honey, I'm home," I called out, a wide smile on my face. But my smile froze instantly. No joyful cry answered me, only a heavy, suffocating silence. And then, from the living room, I heard a voice. My son-in-law, Kevin's. A deep, even voice, but it carried a chill that cut like a knife. "Get that spot on the floor cleaned up. Don't make me say it a third time." I stood there, stunned. The excitement inside me evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that crept up my spine. I tiptoed inside, setting my suitcase down as quietly as I could. The house didn't smell of fresh-baked cookies or flowers like I'd imagined. Instead, the harsh, sterile smell of bleach assaulted my senses, a scent of clean that was so extreme it erased all signs of life. And then I saw my daughter. Laura was on her knees on the gleaming hardwood floor, her thin back hunched over. She was using a small rag, carefully wiping a tiny smudge I couldn't even see. She was wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt. But the thing that made my heart constrict was the apron she had on. It wasn't a cute kitchen apron. It was a piece of coarse, gray cloth, frayed and stained, looking like the uniform of a housemaid in some old black and white movie. She looked up at the sound. Her blue eyes, the same eyes that once sparkled with joy and creativity, were now wide with a mixture of shock and terror. Her face was pale, her cheeks hollowed out. Her once golden hair was pulled back in a sloppy, careless bun. She looked like a pale ghost of her former self, a flower that had been completely drained of its life. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice weak. "I'm here, sweetheart." I tried to keep my voice steady, but a storm was already brewing inside me. Just then, Kevin walked out of his office. He looked the same, tall and polished in an expensive dress shirt and slacks. His hair was perfectly coiffed. The smile on his face was a professional one, the kind you use to sell something or to hide what you're really thinking. "Susan, what a wonderful surprise. Welcome home." He came over and gave me a perfunctory hug. It was firm, but held no warmth. He glanced at Laura, who was still kneeling on the floor, and his smile flickered with annoyance. "Laura, what are you doing? Get up. Your mother is here and you're making a scene." Laura scrambled to her feet, fumbling behind her back, trying to untie the knot of that horrible apron. She moved with a desperate haste, almost a panic, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. And then, a tiny figure peeked out from behind Laura's leg. A little girl with the same silky blonde hair as her mother, her big blue eyes staring at me with a mix of curiosity and fear. It was Lily, my granddaughter. She clung tightly to her mother's pants, not daring to step out. She didn't run to me, didn't throw her arms around me like I'd imagined hundreds of times. She looked at me like I was a dangerous stranger. "Lily, say hello to Grandma," Laura said, her voice trembling slightly. But the little girl just buried her face deeper into her mother's leg. "Oh, she's a bit shy," Kevin said. His tone was meant to sound understanding, but I heard a cruel amusement in it. "She's just not used to you yet. Please, have a seat. Let me get you some water. Laura, why don't you go make your mom a cup of tea? Chamomile." Again, it wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Laura nodded mechanically and hurried into the kitchen. I sat down on the cream-colored leather sofa. Everything in the living room was perfectly arranged. Expensive furniture, not a speck of dust, not a single thing out of place. But it had no soul. It looked more like a showroom in a furniture store than a home. My eyes searched the room. There wasn't a single piece of Laura's pottery. Not one of the jade green vases she loved, none of the plates with her unique hand-painted designs. There was no trace of the artist I knew. The walls were bare, except for a few soulless, generic abstract prints. Kevin sat across from me and began talking about his work, his achievements, his new contracts. He talked non-stop, filling the terrifying silence with his own self-importance. I tried to smile and nod, but my mind wasn't there. My mind was in the kitchen with my daughter, who was quietly making tea like an automaton. My mind was with my tiny granddaughter, who was hiding in fear behind a chair. Laura returned with the tea tray. The apron was gone, but the look of exhaustion and anxiety was not. She placed the cup in front of me, her hand trembling so much the tea nearly sloshed over the side. Kevin shot her a sharp, cutting glance. Laura snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned. "Thank you, honey," I said, trying to send her some warmth with my eyes, but Laura avoided my gaze. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. The rest of the conversation was awkward and disjointed. I asked about Lily, about her preschool. Kevin answered for Laura, saying she was a good girl but a little introverted. I asked Laura about her pottery. A heavy silence fell over the room. "Oh, Laura's taken a break from pottery for a while now, Susan," Kevin said, his voice casual. "It's a pretty messy business. Besides, taking care of Lily and managing the house takes up all her time. Isn't that right, dear?" He turned to Laura, raising an eyebrow. It was a question, but it was also a warning. "Yes," Laura whispered. I just don't have the time." My heart clenched. No time? Laura, the girl who could sit in her studio from dawn till dusk, forgetting to eat, forgetting to sleep, because she was so lost in her passion, was now saying she didn't have time? It was impossible. It was a clumsy lie, a pathetic excuse built to cover up a truth that was far more terrible. For 8 years, I'd been away, dreaming of a warm reunion. For 8 years, I had comforted myself with the thought that my daughter was living a happy life, but in less than an hour, all of those illusions had been shattered. This house wasn't a home. It was a beautifully decorated prison. My daughter wasn't the lady of the house, she was its prisoner, and my sweet granddaughter was growing up in an environment of fear and silence. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, a room so clean it felt cold. I listened to the sounds of the house, the heavy tread of Kevin's footsteps upstairs, the steady hum of the refrigerator. But there was no laughter, no lively chatter, just a thick, heavy quiet, as if all the happiness had been vacuumed out of the place. I looked out the window as the rain began to fall, tapping against the glass like tears. I hadn't cried when my sister died, but tonight, tears rolled silently down my cheeks. They were tears of helplessness, of regret for being so far away, for so long. The following days unfolded in a tense, artificial calm. By day, number 214, Cherry Park Street was a stage for a perfect performance. Kevin left for work each morning, looking the part of a successful businessman, kissing his wife and daughter goodbye with a carefully calculated affection. Laura, as soon as he was gone, would begin her endless cycle of chores: cleaning, laundry, cooking. She moved in silence, as efficient as a machine, her face an emotionless mask. Only occasionally, when she thought no one was watching, would I catch her staring out the window, her gaze empty and longing, as if her soul were trapped while her body labored on. My granddaughter, Lily, was a tiny, quiet shadow. She would often sit in a corner of the living room, playing with a few old dolls, whispering stories only she could hear. She rarely laughed out loud, and whenever I tried to talk to her or invite her to play, she would look at me with wary eyes, then glance quickly at her mother, as if seeking some invisible permission. Fear had seeped deep into her young soul, turning her into a cautious observer instead of a carefree child. I tried to break through the ice. I offered to help Laura with the housework. "Let me do the floors, honey, you take a break," I'd say. But she would just shake her head frantically, a look of panic in her eyes. "I can't, Mom. Kevin, he doesn't like other people doing my work." I suggested we go for a walk. "He wants me to stay home and watch Lily," she'd reply, a weak excuse. Every attempt I made to connect with my daughter was blocked by an invisible wall named Kevin. It was clear my son-in-law had built a system of rules and control so tight that Laura didn't dare step outside. Its boundaries, even with her own mother there. Dinner was the worst time of day. It was when the happy family charade was performed with the most effort, and also when Kevin's cruelty was most apparent. He would sit at the head of the table like a king, critiquing everything. "The chicken is a little dry tonight, dear. You didn't iron this tie properly. Lily, sit up straight." They weren't suggestions. They were tiny, poison darts fired at regular intervals to remind Laura of her place, and all Laura could do was whisper apologies. "I'm sorry. I'll do it better next time." "Yes, dear." She had completely forgotten how to fight back, forgotten that she, too, had a right to be respected. My chance came on a Thursday evening. Kevin had a business dinner and would be home late. His absence seemed to lift a physical weight from the house. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw Laura exhale a long, slow breath, as if shedding an invisible burden. After she put Lily to bed, she sat down on the living room sofa. I made 2 cups of chamomile tea, the kind she and I used to drink together on rainy evenings long ago. I sat down next to her. In the soft, yellow light of the table lamp, I could more clearly see the marks that time and misery had left on my daughter's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the worried lines etched between her brows. And her hands, the hands of the artist, once so deft and creative, were now rough, with a few calluses and small cuts. I gently took one of her hands in mine. "Laura," I began, my voice as soft as I could make it, "I saw a bruise on your wrist the other day. Can I see it?" Laura flinched, trying to pull her hand away, but this time I held on a little tighter. "It's just a bruise, sweetheart. I used to be a nurse. I know how to look at these things." The lie came out naturally. I'd never been a nurse, but I was a mother, and a mother's intuition is sometimes sharper than any medical professional's. She hesitated, then slowly, she turned her wrist over. Under the lamp, the bruise was more visible. It was a purplish blue, fading to yellow at the edges, and it had a strange shape, like the marks of fingers that had squeezed too tight. It felt like someone had taken a pair of iron pliers to my heart. This wasn't a bruise from bumping into something. This was the mark of violence. How did this happen?" I asked, trying to swallow the rage that was rising in my throat. Laura was silent. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her chin began to tremble. A single hot tear fell onto the back of my hand, then another, and then, like a dam breaking, she began to cry. Not loud sobs, but a silent, desperate weeping, the sound of someone who has held it in for so long they've forgotten how to make a noise. Her thin shoulders shook uncontrollably. I said nothing more, just pulled her into my arms and held her tight. I let her cry, let all the pain that had been pent up for years finally pour out. I gently patted her back, just like I did when she was a little girl who'd fallen off her bike. The smell of her hair, the feel of her skin, it was still my daughter, but it all felt so foreign and full of pain. When her crying finally subsided into quiet, choked sobs, I spoke again, my voice a whisper. "Tell me, sweetheart, tell me everything. You're not alone anymore." And then, word by word, the horrific story began to unfold. Laura spoke in a broken, halting voice, interrupted by sobs. She told me about the time after Lily was born. It hadn't been the blissful experience everyone talks about. For Laura, it was a thick, suffocating darkness, a bottomless pit of anxiety and despair. I didn't feel anything, Mom. I would look at Lily, and I knew I was supposed to love her, but I just felt empty. All I wanted to do was sleep. I was terrified every time she cried, afraid I would do something wrong. It was postpartum depression, a cruel illness that had attacked my daughter when she was at her most vulnerable. She had seen a doctor and been prescribed medication. But the pills, while calming the panic, left her mind in a thick fog. Everything just floated by in a dream. I couldn't tell day from night. I just did what I was told. And the person telling her what to do was her mother-in-law, Elizabeth Thompson. She had appeared like a savior. "You just rest, Laura dear. Let me take care of everything." And Elizabeth took over everything. She cared for Lily, managed the household, and most importantly, she handled all the paperwork, all the bills. Laura, in her hazy and grateful state, trusted her completely. One day, Laura continued, her voice trembling, my mother-in-law brought over a thick stack of papers. She said it was health insurance for Lily and power of attorney so she could pay the bills for me. She pointed to where I needed to sign, said it was just a formality, to make things easier while I wasn't feeling well. Laura closed her eyes, as if reliving the terrible moment. I signed it, Mom. I signed it without reading a single word. My hand was shaking so badly she had to hold it steady for me. I was just so tired, so trusting. I just wanted it to be over so I could go back to sleep. A few months later, as Laura slowly weaned off the medication and the fog in her head began to clear, she discovered the truth. Her house, the house Daniel and I had saved our whole lives to buy for her, was no longer hers. It had been transferred to a company called Thompson Family Holdings, a company where Kevin and Elizabeth were the sole owners. When she confronted Kevin, his true colors were revealed. He was no longer the gentle, understanding husband. It was the best way to protect the family's assets, he'd said, his voice cold as ice. You weren't in a position to make sound decisions. We were just helping you. And then came the threat. If you make a scene, he'd snarled, we will take your medical records to court. We will prove that you are an unstable mother. And we will get full custody of Lily. You will never see her again. Do you understand? The fear of losing her child, the most primal and powerful fear of any mother, strangled any thought of fighting back. She was trapped, with no way out. From that day on, Laura whispered, I became someone else. I became the maid in my own house. I did everything Kevin and his mother asked, just so I could stay with Lily. That apron. His mother brought it over. She said it would help me remember my place. The bruise on her wrist, it was from last week, when she accidentally dropped a plate. Kevin had grabbed her arm, squeezed it tight, and hissed, Do you know how much this plate costs? You couldn't afford to replace it in a lifetime of work. Hearing that, I couldn't hold it in any longer. A pure, cold rage rose from the depths of my chest. It wasn't a screaming, explosive anger. It was a quiet, deadly anger, the anger of a mother animal who sees her young being attacked. I had spent my entire life protecting my daughter, building a safe world for her. And in the 8 years I was gone, these wolves in sheep's clothing had torn that world apart, had destroyed my daughter right under their roof. I held Laura tighter, letting her feel my strength. It's okay, sweetheart, I said, my voice no longer trembling, but firm and steady as a rock. I'm here now. Everything is going to be okay. I promise you. That night, after Laura had cried herself to sleep on the sofa, I helped her to her room. I tucked her in, looking at her tear-stained face in the dim light. She looked so small and fragile, but when I returned to the living room and sat alone in the darkness, I didn't feel fragile anymore. The sorrow and despair had given way to something else, a resolve of pure steel. Dawn broke over the Portland sky, painting the gray clouds with a pale pink blush. But for me, the night wasn't really over. The darkness had simply moved from the world outside into the depths of my mind, where a plan was beginning to form, sharp and cold. I hadn't slept a wink. The horror of Laura's confession had become fuel, burning away my fatigue and replacing it with a strange clarity, a focus I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was a researcher, and my subject was the Thompson family. As the first rays of sun filtered through the leaves, casting dancing spots of light on the floor, I was already at my laptop. My fingers typed quietly, almost silently, a habit from my years working in the absolute quiet of the library. Every click of the mouse was deliberate. Every website I visited was a step forward in my private investigation. First, I needed irrefutable proof. Laura's story was her truth, but in the eyes of the law, it needed to be backed up by hard facts. I started with St. Vincent's Hospital. Thankfully, Laura had given me access to her online patient portal years ago, so I could keep track of her health from afar. I logged in with the saved information. A treasure trove of data appeared before me. I carefully reviewed her records from 4 years ago, the period right after Lily was born. It was all there, recorded in cold clinical detail. The psychiatrist's notes described severe postpartum depression, anxiety disorder, and temporary cognitive impairment. And then I found what I was looking for, the prescription history. The names of the drugs, the dosages, the dates they were filled. I saw lorazepam, sertraline, powerful anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications. My eyes locked on a note from March 15th, 4 years ago. The doctor had increased Laura's sertraline dose to the maximum allowable level, citing an acute episode of emotional distress. My heart pounded. I opened another browser window and went to the Multnomah County Property Records website. I typed in the address, 214 Cherry Park, and there it was, the deed transfer. Date of signing, March 16th. Just 1 day after Laura's medication was increased to its highest dose, a day when she would have been at her absolute lowest, mentally and emotionally. There it was. The deadly connection. The silver bullet, as a lawyer would later call it. I took screenshots of both pages, saving them to a carefully encrypted folder on my computer that I named Project Justice. Next, I needed to understand my enemy. Not just Kevin, the arrogant puppet, but the puppet master, Elizabeth Thompson. I typed her name into the search engine. A flood of results appeared. Elizabeth Thompson at the Portland Children's Foundation Gala. Elizabeth Thompson speaking at a Chamber of Commerce event. Elizabeth Thompson accepting the Volunteer of the Year award. In every photo, she was smiling, a warm, benevolent smile that was practiced to perfection. She had built an impeccable public image, a wealthy, charitable woman, a pillar of the community, a perfect cover for a greedy monster. I dug deeper. I searched for the name of the company that owned the house, Thompson Family Holdings, LLC. It was registered 5 years ago, just a few months before Laura gave birth. Managing members, Kevin Thompson and Elizabeth Thompson. A family company clearly established for a single, sinister purpose. I continued searching for other public records, lawsuits, mortgages, and then I found a crack in the wall, a small claims lawsuit filed by a building supplier against Kevin's construction company 2 years ago for an unpaid bill. The case had been settled out of court, but it suggested a flaw in the fortress of financial stability they tried to project. Motive. I needed to find the motive. Simple greed was part of it, but such calculated cruelty often stems from desperation. I remembered what Laura had said. Kevin was always bragging about his success, about big contracts. But perhaps it was all just bluster. The chance to confirm my suspicions came the next day. Laura, after the catharsis of her confession, seemed to have found a sliver of strength. She was still afraid, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. I told her I needed to find some of my old things, which might be stored in the garage. "Let me get them for you, Mom," Laura offered. "It's all right, honey," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You stay up here with Lily. I want to rummage through some old memories by myself." The garage was cold and smelled of damp earth. It was a cluttered space, filled with things the Thompsons no longer used but couldn't be bothered to throw away. Cardboard boxes were stacked high, covered in a thick layer of dust. I pretended to look through a few boxes near the door, but my eyes were scanning the room for anything out of the ordinary. And then I saw it. Tucked behind an old tool cabinet was a small, unsealed cardboard box. It looked like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry. I pulled it out. Inside wasn't Christmas decorations or old clothes. Inside was a stack of papers. My heart began to race again. I carefully went through them, one by one. Letters from banks, notices of overdue business loans, foreclosure warnings not for this house, but for another commercial property in Kevin's company's name. And then, the most chilling of all, letters on plain paper with no letterhead, written in a threatening tone. "Your debt is due, Thompson. Our patience is wearing thin. Don't think we don't know where you live." There it was, the motive. The Thompsons' little empire was anything but stable. They were drowning in debt. They were desperate. And my daughter's house, a valuable, mortgage-free asset, had become their lifeline. They weren't just greedy. They were cornered animals, willing to do anything to survive, even devour their own. I pulled out my phone, switched it to silent, and started taking pictures. Page by page. I made sure every number, every line of text was crystal clear. I worked quickly and methodically, like I was digitizing a rare document in the library. When I was done, I carefully put everything back exactly as I had found it, pushed the box back into its hiding place, and erased any sign of my presence. When I came back upstairs, I kept my face a mask of calm, though a whirlwind of emotions was raging inside me. I had proof of Laura's diminished capacity. I had proof of the Thompsons' financial motive. I had the first crucial pieces of the puzzle. Laura looked at me, her eyes full of fragile hope. "Did you find what you were looking for, Mom?" I smiled at her, the first genuine smile in days. I walked over and gently stroked her hair. "I found much, much more than that, my dear. I knew I couldn't act alone. This fight needed a general for the legal battlefield. I couldn't go to a big corporate law firm where the Thompsons might have connections. I needed someone smart, tough, and perhaps most importantly, someone who hated bullies." I spent that afternoon doing research. I looked for lawyers in Portland who specialized in financial abuse cases, particularly those involving the elderly and vulnerable, and then I found a name, Brenda Nash. She didn't have a fancy office downtown. Her practice was in a smaller, more modest neighborhood, but the reviews for her were staggering. Relentless. Fights for every penny for her clients. She's a shark in a goldfish pond. An old newspaper article called her the nightmare of Will scammers. She was the one I needed. I picked up the phone and called her office. "I need to make an appointment with Miss Nash," I told the secretary, my voice now completely free of hesitation. "It concerns the exploitation of a vulnerable person. I believe she will be very interested in this case." When I hung up, I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting streaks of orange and purple across the sky. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Everything looked so peaceful, but I knew it was just the calm before the storm. 2 days later, I was sitting in the waiting room of Brenda Nash's law office. The space was nothing like I'd imagined a temple of justice would be. There were no marble columns or polished mahogany walls. Instead, Miss Nash's office was compact, cozy, and a bit cluttered in an organized way. Towering stacks of files were neatly arranged on bookshelves. Thick law books lay open on tables, and a few watercolor paintings of the Oregon coast hung on the walls, giving the place a down-to-earth feel. This office wasn't designed to impress clients with luxury. It was designed to get work done. That put me at ease. I had told Laura I was meeting an old friend. I didn't want to worry her any more than necessary, at least not until I had a concrete plan of action. Leaving the house on Cherry Park felt like escaping a low-pressure zone, like taking a breath of fresh air. In just a few short days, the suffocating atmosphere of that place had started to seep into my bones, and I had a newfound admiration for my daughter's incredible endurance over the past 4 years. The office door swung open, and a woman stepped out. It had to be Brenda Nash. She was in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut in a short, no-nonsense style. She wore a simple but well-tailored navy blue pantsuit. But what captured my attention were her eyes. They were hazel, intelligent, sharp, and they missed nothing. They were observing me, sizing me up, even before she spoke. "Mrs. Miller? Come in," she said, her voice deep and decisive. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She pointed to the chair across from her desk. I stepped into her private office. It was much like the waiting room, filled with books and papers. On her desk, next to her computer monitor, was a skeletal model of a piranha, its sharp teeth gleaming under the light, a subtle reminder of its owner's working style. "So," Brenda began as soon as I sat down, "you have a case of exploitation of a vulnerable person. Tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail, no matter how small." And I told her. I laid out the story clearly and methodically, like I was presenting a research paper. I started with the day I returned, what I witnessed, and culminated with Laura's tearful confession. I spoke calmly, trying to remove my own emotions from the narrative, focusing only on the facts. I wanted her to see the logic of the case, not just the pain of a mother. As I spoke, Brenda didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes never leaving mine, occasionally jotting down a few notes in a yellow legal pad. Her silence wasn't disinterest. It was the focused attention of a predator tracking its prey. When I finished, I placed my file folder on the desk and pushed it toward her, and this is what I found on my own. Brenda opened the folder. She examined each document with the meticulous care of an appraiser. She went through Laura's medical records, pausing for a long time on the prescription page and the doctor's notes. She compared the dates with the copy of the property deed transfer. A slight frown creased her forehead. Then she looked at the photos I'd taken in the garage, the debt collection letters, the threats. She reviewed the information I'd printed out about Thompson Family Holdings, LLC. When she had seen it all, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes narrowed as if she were calculating moves on a chessboard. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of a wall clock. Finally she spoke, and her voice held a cold certainty. "This medical evidence is the silver bullet, Mrs. Miller. The dates line up perfectly. Any judge with a shred of decency will see that your daughter was defrauded while she lacked the capacity to make a legal agreement. We can sue to have the transfer nullified. On the legal merits, we will win." A wave of relief washed over me. But Brenda held up a hand, stopping my joy before it could fully form. "However," she continued, "winning on paper and winning in reality are two very different things. The Thompsons, especially the mother, Elizabeth, have built a very solid public image. They have money, and in this city, money can buy time. They'll hire a team of slick lawyers, they'll file delays, they'll appeal, they will drag this out for years. They will smear your daughter's name in court, claim she's an unstable mother, a pill popper. They will exhaust her financially and emotionally. In the end, we might win, but the cost will be immense." Her words were like a bucket of cold water on my budding hope. I had thought that having the evidence was everything, but I had forgotten a crucial element. This battle wouldn't be fought in a vacuum. It would be fought in the real world, where money and power can warp the truth. "So what do we do?" I asked, a hint of desperation creeping back into my voice. Brenda smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of the piranha on her desk. "We don't play their game, Mrs. Miller. We're not going to launch a frontal assault on their fortress. We're going to do something much smarter. We're going to erode their foundation, bit by bit, until the whole thing collapses on its own." She got up and walked over to a large whiteboard on the wall. She picked up a marker and started diagramming her ideas. "The Thompsons have two most valuable assets, their money and their reputation. Your evidence suggests their money is running out. Therefore, the one thing they are protecting at all costs is their reputation. That is their Achilles heel." She circled two words, "Elizabeth and Kevin." "Elizabeth," she said, "is the brains. She builds her image through charity work and social connections. Her greatest fear is public humiliation, being ostracized by her community. Kevin," she continued, "is the enforcer. He builds his image through business success and his position on prestigious boards like that Children's Foundation. His greatest fear is being seen as a failure, an incompetent. Our strategy won't be an all-out attack, but a guerrilla warfare campaign. We will attack those weak points. We won't file the lawsuit immediately. That would give them time to prepare. Instead, we will begin by sowing the seeds of doubt." She turned back to me, her eyes glinting with professional excitement. "You said you were a librarian. You're good at finding and organizing information, so let's use those skills. That anonymous email you were thinking of sending is a brilliant start. We'll make people in their social circles start asking questions. We'll release small, untraceable bits of information that are just enough to get people whispering. We will make Kevin's business partners nervous. We will make the donors to Elizabeth's charity think twice. We won't accuse them of anything publicly. We'll simply create a lot of smoke, and everyone will assume there's a fire. Meanwhile," she concluded, "I will prepare the perfect lawsuit. We will wait. We will wait until they are scared enough, until their guard is down. And when they make a mistake, and they will make a mistake under pressure, that's when we'll deliver the finishing blow." I sat there, completely captivated by her strategy. It wasn't just smart, it had a ruthless beauty to it. Brenda Nash didn't just want to win justice for me, she wanted to annihilate her opponent. And in that moment, I knew I had found the right person. "Are you ready for a fight like this, Mrs. Miller?" Brenda asked, her tone serious. "It will require patience and nerves of steel." I looked her straight in the eye, letting all the determination I felt show in my gaze. "Miss Nash," I said, I have spent the last 8 years patiently sitting by the bedside of a dying person. My nerves aren't made of steel, they're made of titanium. Brenda Nash looked at me for a long moment, then she nodded, a look of acknowledgement and respect on her face. Good, then let's get to work. Returning to the house on Cherry Park after meeting with Brenda Nash was like being a soldier re-entering enemy territory with a secret battle plan. On the surface, I was still Susan Miller, the quiet, widowed mother, perhaps a bit resigned to the situation. I still helped Laura prepare meals, still read stories to Lily before bed, still offered a polite smile to Kevin when he came home at the end of the day. But inside, a profound shift had occurred. Every action now had a purpose. Every word, every glance was calculated. I had become an actress in the drama of my own life, and my role was that of someone completely harmless. That night, after making sure the house was asleep, I sat in front of my laptop, the screen's pale blue light illuminating my focused face. It was time to fire the first shot, a silent shot with potentially devastating power. I opened a private browser, used a VPN to mask my IP address skills I'd picked up from cybersecurity books at the library. I was ready for this moment. I logged into the anonymous email account I had created, concernedcitizenpdx@email.com. A perfect name, vague enough not to raise suspicion, yet suggestive of a citizen's legitimate concern. The recipients, the entire board of directors for the Portland Children's Foundation, a list I had easily found on their official website. Kevin Thompson, with his title of Director of Development, was featured prominently. I took a deep breath and began to type. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't use accusatory or angry language. Verbal aggression would only make them defensive. Instead, I used a much more powerful weapon, subtle insinuation and skillfully disguised concern. Subject: a small question from a longtime supporter. Dear esteemed members of the board, first, please allow me to express my deep admiration for the incredible work the Portland Children's Foundation does for our community. My family has been a quiet supporter for many years, and we have always believed in the integrity and transparency of the organization. Recently, during a conversation with some fellow donors, a small question arose that I thought the board might want to consider. It has to do with the ethical and financial due diligence process for board members, especially for those in key positions related to fundraising and development. Of course, we have complete faith in all of you. However, in today's climate, where reputation is a charity's most valuable asset, do we have sufficiently robust mechanisms in place to ensure that members are not entangled in personal conflicts of interest, or that their personal assets do not come from questionable sources that could tarnish the Foundation's image? This is merely a thought, born from a desire to protect the good name the Foundation has worked so hard to build. I believe that proactively clarifying these matters will only strengthen the community's trust in us. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, a concerned citizen. I reread the email. Perfect. No names were mentioned, no specific accusations were made. But for people in the world of business and charity who are always sensitive to issues of image and risk, the message was crystal clear. It was like a small pebble tossed into a perfectly still pond. It wouldn't cause a tidal wave, but its ripples would spread, touching every corner. It would plant a seed of doubt in their minds, and at the right moment, that seed would sprout. I hit send. A feeling of both thrill and satisfaction coursed through me. The pebble had been tossed. The following days, I became a patient observer. I watched for any small change in Kevin's behavior. 2 days after the email was sent, he came home looking more irritable than usual. He threw his leather briefcase onto a chair with frustration and loosened his tie as if it were choking him. At dinner, he was mostly silent, just staring down at his plate. When Laura timidly asked if work was okay, he just snapped, same as always. But I saw him constantly checking his phone, his thumb swiping across the screen with a visible restlessness. By the 3rd day, it became clearer. He came home earlier than usual, and I overheard him on the phone in his office, his voice sharp but pressed down to a whisper. I made a point of walking past, pretending to get a glass of water. I only caught a few fragments, completely absurd, a ridiculous rumor. I'll speak to the chairman. No, my finances are perfectly transparent. The seed had sprouted. I could picture the scene, an informal meeting, a few discreet phone calls between board members. No one was accusing Kevin of anything, but the question had been raised. Hey, have you heard anything about this? Doesn't Kevin's business seem a little shaky lately? Should we maybe take a closer look? The smoke had been created, and now people were starting to look for the fire. I decided it was time for the next step, a move aimed at Elizabeth, the true mastermind. For her, the weapon wasn't questions about finances, but whispers about social standing. I knew that Elizabeth was a member of a prestigious book club for Portland's high society ladies. They met once a month at the members' homes. I did some research and found out the next meeting was at the end of the week at another member's house. I needed a way to deliver my message right into the lioness's den. I used another anonymous email, this time with a more feminine handle. RoseWatcher45. I sent a short message to the host of the upcoming book club meeting, a woman with a reputation for being a gossip. Subject: regarding the upcoming meeting. Hello, Mrs. Wallace. I'm writing this with some hesitation. I'm a friend of a member of your book club, and I heard the next meeting will be discussing the novel The Secret Inheritance. What a fascinating choice. It's just a strange coincidence, but I recently heard a real-life story that reminded me so much of the book. A story about a seemingly respectable family here in Portland, hiding terrible financial secrets, and the very questionable lengths they went to maintain their facade, even involving the exploitation of a family member suffering from a health crisis. It's such a sad and frightening story about how greed can destroy people. Just a passing thought I wanted to share. I hope your book club has a lively discussion. Best, a fellow book lover. This email was even more subtle than the last. It was a piece of gossip wrapped in the guise of literary discussion. It named no names, offered no proof, but it planted a dramatic story in Mrs. Wallace's mind. And I knew for a fact that a woman like her wouldn't be able to keep that story to herself. At the book club meeting, between glasses of wine and slices of cake, that story would be retold, embellished, and everyone's eyes, intentionally or not, would drift toward Elizabeth Thompson. The ripples had been created. I didn't need to do anything more but watch. I watched Kevin become increasingly irritable and paranoid. I watched Laura, who knew nothing of my plan, but seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. She told me Kevin had been flying off the handle for no reason, and that her mother-in-law had canceled a lunch with her at the last minute with no explanation. In the kitchen, as we were cleaning vegetables together, Laura looked at me, a worried expression in her eyes. Mom, do you think something's wrong? I placed my hand on hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Everything's going to be okay, honey. Sometimes, before the sky can clear, you have to have a storm. She didn't fully understand what I meant, but she nodded. For the first time in a long while, she seemed to believe me. A week passed since I had tossed my pebbles into the placid pond of the Thompson family. 7 long days, during which I lived in a state of high alert, watching the ripples spread and waiting for them to turn into real waves. The atmosphere in the house on Cherry Park had grown thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The silence was no longer the suffocating quiet of before. It was a calculated silence, where every small sound, every long sigh, carried a hidden meaning. Kevin was now like a caged animal. He paced the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his conversations growing more urgent and desperate. He no longer tried to hide his frustration. His outbursts at Laura became more frequent, for the most ridiculous reasons. A speck of dust on a table, a cup of coffee that wasn't hot enough. It wasn't the anger of a patriarch, but the lashing out of a man who was losing control and needed somewhere to direct his impotence. But more interesting was the change in Elizabeth. She didn't call, didn't visit. The silence from her was more ominous than any threat. I knew she wasn't the type to sit back and take a hit. A woman who had spent a lifetime building a fortress of reputation wouldn't let it be eroded by anonymous whispers. She was planning, she was investigating, and I knew, sooner or later, she would come for me. And then, it happened. On a Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Laura answered it and returned to the living room, her face pale. "Mom, it's my mother-in-law." Elizabeth Thompson swept in, dressed in her usual elegant attire, her silver hair styled in a perfect coif. But today, her smile was strained. Her eyes, when they met mine, no longer held their usual condescension, but a sharp, probing coldness. She wasn't here to visit her family. She was here on a reconnaissance mission. "Susan," she began, her voice falsely sweet, "so good to see you. I was meaning to call and invite you for tea, but my charity work has been so demanding." A bald-faced lie. "That's quite all right, Elizabeth," I replied, my voice calm. "I've been enjoying some quiet time with my family." I intentionally emphasized the word family, turning it into a small knife. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in mental chess. Every sentence was a move, cloaked in layers of social pleasantry. She asked about my health, about my life in Florida. I answered politely, while also asking about Kevin's thriving business and her wonderful community activities. We were probing each other, searching for a crack, a sign of weakness. Finally, unable to contain herself any longer, Elizabeth got to the point, though she still tried to veil it. "Strange things are happening in Portland lately," she said, stirring the tea Laura had nervously brought out. "Baseless rumors spreading through the business community. It's so sad to see how some people will sow discord just for their own amusement." She looked directly at me, a challenging glint in her eyes. I took a sip of my tea, keeping my hand perfectly steady. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "But I've always believed, Elizabeth, that if a person's life is in order, no rumor can harm them. The truth always has a way of coming to light, don't you think?" A muscle twitched in Elizabeth's jaw. She hadn't gotten the reaction she expected. She had hoped I would be flustered or defensive, but my calmness seemed to make her even more suspicious. The visit ended quickly and awkwardly. As Elizabeth was leaving, she turned at the door and gave me one last look. "We should talk, Susan. Just the two of us. Perhaps at my lawyer's office. To clear the air." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons, a threat. As soon as she was gone, I called Brenda Nash. I recounted the entire conversation. Brenda just chuckled on the other end of the line. "You see, Mrs. Miller, the fish has taken the bait. She's panicking. She wants to pull you onto her territory, with her lawyer there to intimidate you. We're not going to play that game." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We agree to meet," Brenda replied, "but not at her lawyer's office. We'll meet on neutral ground, and we won't go there to defend ourselves. We'll go there to attack." The meeting was arranged for 2 days later, in a small conference room at a downtown hotel, a sterile, anonymous space where power couldn't be projected through expensive furniture. Brenda and I arrived a few minutes early. Brenda wore a charcoal gray suit. She looked both professional and formidable. She placed her leather briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside was my perfectly organized file. "Let me do the talking, Mrs. Miller," she instructed. "You just sit there and maintain that excellent calm you've been showing. Let your silence make them nervous." Kevin and Elizabeth arrived on time, accompanied by an older man in a pinstripe suit, who must have been their lawyer. Elizabeth's face was a mask of ice, while Kevin looked agitated, his eyes darting around the room. After cursory introductions, the Thompsons' lawyer began, his tone condescending. "We are here today to clear up some misunderstandings. My clients, Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Thompson, are very concerned for Laura's well-being. They have only ever acted in her best interest, and the best interest of the child." Brenda let him finish. She didn't interrupt, just sat there, tapping a single finger on the tabletop. When he was done, she slowly pushed my file to the middle of the table. "Best interest, you say?" Brenda began, her voice low and even, but every word landed like a hammer blow. "Let's talk about best interest. This is Laura Thompson's medical file. This page, dated March 15th, shows her doctor increased her antidepressant dosage to the maximum level, citing an acute episode of emotional distress. Her doctor is prepared to testify that at that time, she lacked the cognitive capacity to sign a birthday card, let alone a legal document." She flipped to the next page. "And this, gentlemen and ma'am, is the deed transferring ownership of a property worth nearly $1 million. The date of signing, March 16th, 1 day later. You call that protection, but I, and any jury in the state of Oregon, would call that fraud and the exploitation of a person in their most vulnerable state. The color drained from Elizabeth and Kevin's faces. Their confidence began to crack. Their old lawyer took the file, his eyes scanning the pages. He was starting to look uncomfortable. "This is a misunderstanding," he mumbled, but his voice had lost its steel. Laura signed willingly. Brenda scoffed. Willingly? A person on a high enough dose of lorazepam that she can barely walk straight willingly signs over her house to you? That's a hard story to sell. She stood up and paced slowly around the table, like a panther circling its prey. And we haven't even gotten to the motive. We haven't talked about Mr. Thompson's overdue business loans. We haven't talked about the not-so-friendly collection letters he's been trying to hide. It seems the best interest you were concerned with was the best interest of the Thompson family bank account, wasn't it? That was a direct hit. Kevin flinched, his face going white. Elizabeth shot Brenda a look filled with pure venom. "You're making baseless accusations," she hissed. "I'm stating facts, Mrs. Thompson," Brenda replied coolly. "And here is our offer. It is a one-time offer. You have 48 hours. Within the next 48 hours, you will sign the documents returning full ownership of the house to Laura Thompson. In addition, you will pay a settlement of $500,000 for the financial and emotional damages you have caused her over the past 4 years." Their lawyer let out a forced laugh. "That's preposterous. If, after 48 hours, Brenda continued, ignoring him, "we do not have your agreement, then this file will not just be going to civil court. A copy will be sent to the district attorney's office with a criminal complaint for fraud and exploitation of the elderly and disabled a felony that carries a lengthy prison sentence. And another copy might just accidentally find its way into the hands of a few investigative reporters I know at the Oregonian. Imagine the headlines: Elizabeth, Portland's charity queen scams ailing daughter-in-law out of her home. I don't think your donors would like reading that." A dead silence filled the room. Brenda's threat wasn't just about money. It was aimed directly at the thing Elizabeth feared losing most, her reputation and social standing. Finally, Elizabeth stood up, her body trembling with rage. "You've made a great mistake, making an enemy of my family," she said through gritted teeth. "You will regret this." "The clock is ticking, ma'am," Brenda replied nonchalantly, sitting back down and starting to gather her papers as if the meeting was already over. They left without another word. The conference room door slammed shut behind them. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. "That was incredible," I whispered. Brenda turned to me, a victorious smile playing on her lips. "Now we wait and see, Mrs. Miller. We see just how deep their arrogance runs. But I have a feeling we just backed a wild animal into a corner, and cornered animals tend to do very crazy things." Her words felt like a prophecy, and I knew that the next 48 hours would decide everything. The 48 hours after the showdown at the hotel passed with the weight of lead. It was a period of tense waiting, a silent battle of wills where every passing second could represent a decision being made. I tried to keep busy, playing with Lily in the yard, helping Laura reorganize the kitchen cabinets, but my mind was a whirlwind of possible scenarios. Was the Thompsons' arrogance greater than their fear of exposure? Were they smart enough to see they were on the edge of a cliff and accept Brenda's offer? Their silence was the answer. Not a single phone call, not one email. They had chosen the path of confrontation. That silence wasn't a sign of surrender. It was defiance, an unspoken declaration of war. "Just as I expected," Brenda said over the phone on the third morning, after the deadline had passed. There was no disappointment in her voice, but rather a hint of professional excitement. "They're too confident in their own power. Fine. Now it's time to show them where the real power lies." And Brenda was true to her word. That afternoon, the dam began to break. Brenda didn't send the file to a major newspaper right away. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she used a more subtle tactic. She leaked the most critical information, the copies of the medical records and the deed transfer, to a well-known investigative blogger in Portland, someone who specialized in exposing the secrets of the city's elite under a mysterious pseudonym. This blogger had a loyal readership and could spread information faster than any traditional newspaper. The post went live around 4 in the afternoon with a sensational headline: "Darkness behind the mansion doors. when philanthropy is just a mask for fraud. The article didn't mention the Thompson family by name. Instead, it used descriptions so detailed that anyone in their circle could immediately identify them. A prominent Portland business family, whose matriarch is a respected philanthropist, a daughter-in-law, a talented artist, who fell into a deep postpartum depression. A valuable property in the Cherry Park area, suspiciously transferred while the wife was on a high dosage of psychiatric medication. The article even included blurred images of the deed and the prescription, with the dates circled in an ominous red. It was like a time bomb going off. First, it hit social media. The link to the blog post was shared in the private groups of Portland's wealthy elite. The comments started to appear, first with skepticism, then with whispers and speculation. Are they talking about the T family? I always felt something was off about her. Poor daughter-in-law, she always looked so sad. By evening, the story had broken out of those private groups. It was shared on Twitter, on Facebook. A few local journalists started sniffing around for a story. The phone in the house on Cherry Park began to ring. Laura, unaware of what was happening, picked it up. "Is this the Thompson residence? This is KGW News calling." She hung up in a panic. Kevin came home in a state of absolute fury, his face flushed, his eyes wild. He didn't say a word, just stormed into his office and slammed the door. I could hear him growling into the phone, curses echoing through the house. The real storm hit the next morning. The city's tabloid paper had grabbed the story and plastered it on the front page, this time with no ambiguity. They named Kevin and Elizabeth Thompson outright. They even sent a photographer to park across the street from our house and Elizabeth's. My phone started ringing. It was Brenda. "Turn on the TV, Mrs. Miller, the local news." I switched on the television. On the screen was footage of Elizabeth Thompson, filmed from a distance, hurrying from her house to her car, trying to shield her face from the camera. A reporter was shouting questions at her. "Mrs. Thompson, do you have any comment on the allegations that you defrauded your own daughter-in-law?" She didn't answer, just scrambled into her car and sped away. My heart was pounding. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but another part felt a cold dread. We had started a public war. There was no turning back now. Laura walked into the living room, holding her phone, her face ashen. "Mom, online, they're talking about me and Kevin's family." Her eyes filled with tears. "What is happening, Mom?" I turned off the TV and went to her. It was time to tell her the truth. I took her hands, looked her straight in the eye, and told her everything. I told her about my investigation, about Brenda, about the confrontation and the ultimatum. I told her I was doing all of this for her, for Lily, for justice. Laura sat there, listening in silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't blame me. Instead, when I finished, she looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw not fear in her eyes, but a spark of indignation, a newly awakened resilience. "They took so much from me, Mom," she whispered. "I won't let them take the truth, too." We spent the rest of the day inside, in the eye of the hurricane. The phone rang incessantly. Message notifications pinged constantly. Outside, the photographer's car remained parked like a waiting vulture. Support began to come from unexpected places. A neighbor brought over a plate of cookies, telling Laura, "You stay strong, dear. We're all behind you." An old college friend of Laura's, whom she'd lost touch with, called and said she believed her 100%. A group of local potters started a social media campaign with the hashtag number Justice for Laura, sharing stories of her talent and kindness. The needle hadn't just pricked the bag, it had ripped open the Thompsons' tapestry of lies, exposing the rotten core for the world to see. But Brenda's attack wasn't limited to the media front. That same day, she officially filed the civil lawsuit and sent the entire case file to the district attorney's office. The legal war had officially begun. That evening, Kevin didn't come home. Laura received a single, blunt text message from him. "You've ruined everything." I knew this was the most dangerous moment. When a man like Kevin feels he has lost everything, reputation, career, money, he becomes unpredictable and reckless. His silence was more terrifying than his rage. Brenda thought so too. She called me that evening. "Be careful, Mrs. Miller. He's cornered now, and there's no telling what he'll do. You and your daughter need to be cautious. Should I call the police and have them keep an eye on the house?" I understood her concern. "Thank you, Brenda, but not yet. I want to see what he's really capable of in this situation." Despite thanking her for the warning, I couldn't rest easy. I walked through the house, checking all the windows and doors. I drew the curtains. The house, which had once been my daughter's prison, had now become our fortress. The tense atmosphere after Brenda's warning stretched over the next 2 days. Every scrape of a tree branch against a window, every car that passed in the night, made me jump. Laura and I lived in a state of high alert, moving through the house like sentinels, always listening, always watching. Lily seemed to sense the adults' unease. She clung to her mother, and her whispered conversations with her dolls grew quieter. Kevin still hadn't returned. He didn't call, didn't text. His disappearance felt like the eerie calm before an earthquake, when the ground stops trembling only to gather energy for a more violent jolt. Elizabeth, too, had vanished from the public eye. The scandal had swallowed them, and they had sunk to the bottom, perhaps to plot one final act of revenge. On the third night, the storm came, both literally and figuratively. A ferocious gale swept through Portland, bringing torrential rain and crashing thunder. The wind howled outside, slamming large branches against the roof, creating terrifying sounds. The old house groaned with each gust. We had put Lily to bed early, where she huddled under the covers, frightened. Laura and I sat in the living room, the only light coming from a single table lamp that cast a warm circle in the surrounding gloom. We tried to make small talk, about old times, about happy memories, as if the words themselves could form a shield against the fury of nature and of man. Around midnight, when the storm was at its peak, I heard a strange sound. It wasn't the wind or the rain. It was a soft, dry snap from the backyard, like a twig breaking underfoot. Laura heard it too. She stopped talking, her eyes wide, looking at me. "Did you hear that?" "You stay here with Lily," I whispered, getting to my feet. My heart started to pound, a cold chill running down my spine. "I'll go check." I tiptoed to the kitchen, which had a large sliding glass door looking out onto the backyard. I didn't turn on the light, just pressed myself against the wall and peered outside. The rain was a solid sheet of water, creating a thick curtain. But then, a flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire yard in a ghostly, momentary light. And I saw him. Kevin. He was there. He was wearing a dark, hooded, soaking wet jacket, his face pale and gaunt in the lightning's flash. He wasn't looking at the house. He was moving along the back wall, holding something that looked like a crowbar. He was testing the windows, looking for a weak point. My breath caught in my chest. He was back. Not to talk, not to negotiate. He was back like a thief, a home invader in the night. Brenda's warning echoed in my head. Cornered animals tend to do very crazy things. I backed away quickly, signaling for Laura to stay quiet. I pulled out my phone, my trembling fingers dialing 911. But before I could hit the call button, I heard another sound, a sharp, shattering noise from the dining room. He had broken a small window pane. "Laura, get Lily and go into my bedroom. Lock the door. Hide under the bed. Now!" I commanded, my voice a fierce whisper. Fear had given way to a mother's primal instinct to protect. Laura, though her face was drained of all color, moved instantly. She scooped up a sleepy Lily and ran upstairs. I heard the bedroom door slam shut and the bolt slide home. Now it was just me and him. I scanned the kitchen, looking for something, anything, to defend myself with. My eyes landed on the heavy wooden knife block on the counter. Without hesitating, I pulled out the largest chef's knife, its steel blade gleaming in the dim light. I knew it was insane, a 66-year-old woman with a knife against a strong, desperate man. But I had no other choice. He was not getting up those stairs. The crunch of broken glass underfoot announced Kevin's entry through the shattered window. He straightened up, soaking wet, rainwater dripping from his hair and jacket onto the floor. He looked at me, and his eyes made my blood run cold. They weren't arrogant or angry anymore. They were empty, wild, the eyes of a man who had gone past the breaking point. "You," he snarled, his voice a hoarse rasp. You ruined me, you and your daughter. You took everything from me. You ruined yourself, Kevin, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, my hand gripping the knife handle. You had a family, a life. You threw it all away for your own greed. Greed? He let out a horrible, broken laugh. You don't know anything. My mother, she pushed me into this. The debts, the pressure. She said it was the only way. And now she's abandoned me. Everyone has abandoned me. He started walking toward me, his steps unsteady. The smell of alcohol and damp rot wafted off him. He wasn't holding the crowbar anymore. He must have dropped it outside. But he didn't need a weapon. His desperation and madness were the most dangerous weapons of all. If I've lost everything, he muttered, then you get nothing. This house, it belongs to no one. And then I realized his true intention. He wasn't here to attack us. He was here to destroy the house. He was here to burn it down. A desperate, insane plan from a man with nothing left to lose. Burn the evidence, maybe collect the insurance money, or simply get his revenge. I had to stop him. I had to hold him off until the police arrived. I prayed a neighbor had heard the glass break and made the call. Stay back, Kevin, I yelled, holding the knife out in front of me. Don't take another step. He didn't seem to hear or care. He kept coming, his eyes glazed over. It's all going to burn, just like my life. When he was just a few feet away, I did something that surprised even me. I let out a yell and threw the heavy ceramic vase from the kitchen counter at him. It was one of the few remaining pieces of Laura's old work, one I'd found while cleaning out the storage shed. The vase glanced off his shoulder and shattered against the wall. The sound seemed to snap him out of his trance. He flinched, looking at me as if seeing the knife in my hand for the first time. The madness in his eyes turned to pure rage. You stupid old woman, he roared and lunged at me. I was ready. As he charged, I didn't meet him head on. I sidestepped, and at the same time, I shoved him hard at the hip with all my strength. Thrown off balance and slipping on the wet floor, Kevin stumbled and fell forward. Just then, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing closer and closer, cutting through the noise of the storm. The police were coming. Kevin heard them too. He panicked, scrambling to get up. But I was on him. I didn't use the knife. I used the weight of my own body, throwing myself onto his back, using my knee to pin his arm to the floor. I wasn't as strong as him, but I had the advantage of surprise and the fierce determination of a mother protecting her child. It's over, Kevin, I panted, holding him down. It's all over. He struggled, cursing, but his desperation had sapped his strength. Red and blue lights flashed outside the window, painting the room in eerie, strobing colors. The front door burst open, and 2 police officers in wet uniforms stormed in, their guns drawn. Police! Everybody freeze! They took in the scene. An old woman pinning a large man to a floor littered with broken pottery, a chef's knife lying nearby. But in an instant, they assessed the situation. Ma'am, put down the knife, one of the officers said, his voice reassuring. You're safe now. I slowly let the knife go. All my strength seemed to leave me at once. I staggered to my feet as the officers handcuffed Kevin, who was no longer resisting, just lying there, face down, his shoulders shaking with the racking sobs of a defeated man. I stood there, trembling and breathless, in the wreckage of my kitchen, listening to the storm raging outside and the sound of police sirens right at my door. The storm outside still howled, but inside the house on Cherry Park, a strange quiet had fallen, broken only by the crunch of broken pottery under the boots of police officers and the crackle of their radios. The flashing red and blue lights from the patrol cars outside painted everything in surreal colors, turning our familiar kitchen into a crime scene. I stood there, still shaking. A blanket and EMT had draped over my shoulders. They had checked me over, determining I had no injuries beyond a few scrapes and a wildly racing heart. Kevin had been taken away, his face a blank mask as he was escorted to a patrol car, disappearing into the rain and the darkness. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. The wounded animal had finally been caged. As soon as the police confirmed the situation was secure, Laura dared to open the bedroom door. She flew down the stairs, followed by a small, eye-rubbing Lily, confused about what was happening. When she saw me standing in the middle of the mess, surrounded by police, the color drained from Laura's face. "Mom, are you okay?" she cried, rushing over to hug me. Her embrace was tight, as if she were afraid I might disappear if she let go. "I'm fine, honey, I'm okay," I reassured her, patting her back. "It's over. He's gone." Lily, seeing the broken pieces on the floor and the uniformed strangers, began to cry softly. "Mommy, I'm scared." Laura quickly let go of me and scooped her small daughter into her arms, whispering words of comfort. In that moment, I saw the clear image of a lioness, terrified herself, but putting her cub's safety above all else. My daughter, the one I had thought was broken, still had all her strength inside. A kind-faced female police officer approached us. "We'll need to take your statement, Mrs. Miller, when you're ready. Your daughter and granddaughter can wait upstairs if they'd like." Brenda Nash arrived shortly after, only about 20 minutes after I'd called 911. She wore a long raincoat, her short hair tousled by the wind, but her eyes were as sharp and focused as ever. She scanned the scene, nodded at the police officers as if they were old colleagues, and came straight to me. "You did good, Susan," she said, her deep, steady voice having a calming effect. "You were braver than anyone I know." She looked over at Laura and Lily. "Are you two all right?" Laura nodded, though tears still streamed down her face. "Thanks to my mom." Brenda nodded. "I'll be here with you through the whole statement. Don't worry, just tell them exactly what happened. You acted in self-defense and in defense of your family. You set a trap," and he walked right into it. Brenda's words made me realize something. In some unconscious way, my plan had evolved beyond anonymous emails. The final trap wasn't set with words, but with actions. My warning to Laura, the constant state of readiness, it wasn't just paranoia. Deep down, I had anticipated that Kevin's desperation would push him to this. I had prepared for it. I had set a physical and psychological trap, and just as predicted, he couldn't escape it. I sat in the living room and recounted the entire event to the officer. I spoke calmly, clearly, not leaving out a single detail. The strange noise, seeing Kevin in the yard, his breaking the window, his crazed words, and the moment I had to defend myself. As I spoke, it felt like I was narrating someone else's story, a movie I had just watched. Perhaps that's how the mind protects itself from overwhelming shock. After the statement was taken, the crime scene unit arrived. They took photographs, collected fingerprints, bagged shards of broken glass. Our home was no longer a private space. It had become part of a criminal investigation. Brenda pulled me aside. "This is going to be very good for our case," she said quietly. "Kevin's actions tonight hammered the final nail in his own coffin. He's not just facing fraud charges now, but also breaking and entering, attempted destruction of property, and possibly assault. There's no way he's getting out of this." She glanced towards the stairs, where Laura had just taken Lily back to bed. "What about Elizabeth?" I asked. "Elizabeth will try to deny any involvement," Brenda replied, a wry smile on her lips. "She'll say her son acted alone, that she had no idea. But Kevin's insane actions are the clearest proof of their desperation. No prosecutor is going to believe she was completely innocent in the original fraud. We'll apply pressure. We'll make Kevin choose. Either take the fall for everything and go to prison for a very long time, or testify about his mother's role in exchange for a lighter sentence. Most men like him choose the second option." The next morning, after the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear blue sky and crisp air, our house looked pathetic. The dining room window was boarded up with plywood. The broken pottery was gone, but the signs of the struggle remained. News of Kevin's arrest was everywhere. This time, it wasn't rumors or anonymous blog posts. It was official news confirmed by the Portland Police Bureau. The media's attention now turned to us, but in a completely different way. We were no longer the subjects of speculation. We were survivors. The story now had a hero, an elderly mother who bravely fought off an attacker to protect her family, and a clear villain. Public opinion was firmly on our side. And then, something unexpected happened. Something that proved the ripples I had created had truly broken the dam of silence. A woman contacted Brenda's office. She was a former accountant for Kevin's construction company who had been fired a year prior. She said she quit because she could no longer stomach the financial fraud that Kevin and his mother had instructed her to commit. She had kept copies of several key documents, proof that they had been deliberately hiding debts and inflating revenue. She had stayed silent out of fear, but after reading our story, she decided she had to speak up. "This is it," Brenda told me over the phone, her voice electric with excitement. "This is the final blow for Elizabeth. We don't just have proof of the fraud against your daughter, we now have proof of business fraud. Her entire fortress is about to crumble, Susan." I hung up the phone, feeling an incredible sense of relief. The trap I had originally set was just to catch a fox, but the fox's madness had led us straight to the den of the alpha wolf. I went into the kitchen, where Laura was quietly cleaning. She had replaced the plywood over the window with a temporary curtain. She was trying to erase the traces of the horrible night, trying to reclaim her space. "Mom," she said, without turning around, "I think I want to start making pottery again." I walked over to her and looked into her eyes. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't see fear or emptiness. I saw exhaustion, yes, but underneath it was a determination, a small flame that had been rekindled. The flame of creativity, of life. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart," I said. And this time, the tears that rolled down my cheeks weren't of sorrow or anger. They were tears of hope. The storm had passed, and in its aftermath, new life was beginning to push up through the wreckage. 6 months after that fateful, stormy night, I sat on a hard wooden bench in the Multnomah County Courthouse. The artificial light from the fluorescent bulbs overhead cast a solemn, cold glow. But I didn't feel cold. Inside, I felt a warmth, a sense of peace I hadn't known for a very long time. I sat there, holding my daughter Laura's hand. She sat up straight, her eyes fixed forward, no longer showing any trace of fear or resignation. Beside her, our lawyer Brenda Nash sat with a relaxed confidence, like a general who already knows the outcome of the battle. On the other side of the courtroom, at the defendant's table, were the remains of the Thompson family. Kevin looked haggard in his orange prison jumpsuit, his face unshaven, his eyes staring blankly at the floor. He had pleaded guilty to most of the charges in exchange for a lighter sentence, a deal Brenda had skillfully negotiated after he decided to testify about his mother's full involvement. And Elizabeth, she sat there, in an expensive suit that now seemed too large for her withered frame. Her silver hair was no longer in a proud coif, but hung limply. The veneer of the charity queen had completely shattered, revealing a bitter, defeated old woman. She had been convicted in a separate trial weeks earlier, based on the irrefutable evidence from the former accountant and the testimony of her own son. Today was the sentencing for them both. The judge, a woman with graying hair and a stern face, spoke, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. She recounted the charges: fraud, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, business fraud, criminal conspiracy. When she spoke of Kevin's actions on the night of the storm, breaking and entering, attempted destruction of property, her voice grew even firmer. "The defendant's behavior," she declared, "is not merely a financial crime. It is a profound betrayal of trust, an attack on the core values of family and society. You took advantage of a woman at her weakest moment, robbing her not only of her property, but of her safety, her self-worth, and 4 years of her life." She looked directly at Elizabeth. "Mrs. Thompson, you used your reputation as a shield to hide your despicable actions. You have tarnished the very community you pretended to serve." Then she turned to Kevin. "And you, Mr. Thompson, you allowed greed and weakness to turn you into a monster, willing to destroy your own family. Your actions on that night showed a cruelty and a disregard for the law that cannot be tolerated." And then came the sentences. The judge's voice rang out, clear and final. "For the defendant, Elizabeth Thompson, this court sentences you to 7 years in prison. For the defendant, Kevin Thompson, for the crimes stated, this court sentences you to 12 years in prison." The judge's gavel came down with a sharp, decisive crack, putting an end to a dark chapter. Elizabeth showed no reaction, just sat frozen like a statue. Kevin buried his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. As the bailiffs came to lead them away, I didn't feel triumph or joy. I just felt an immense sense of relief. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. Everything had been put back in its proper place. When we walked out of the courthouse, The bright autumn Portland sun was warm and brilliant. A few reporters tried to approach us, but Brenda skillfully shielded us and led us to her car. "It's over now," she said, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "Now it's time to start a new life." And that's exactly what we did. The legal battle didn't just return the house to Laura. The court also ordered the Thompsons to pay a significant sum in damages. Their assets, including Elizabeth's luxurious home and other investments, were liquidated. Their small empire, built on a foundation of lies, had crumbled to dust. We didn't use the money for lavish living. We used it to heal and rebuild. The very first thing Laura did was convert the cold, damp garage, the place where I had found the first clues, into a real pottery studio. She bought a new potter's wheel, a modern kiln, and beautiful pine shelves to display her work. Soon, the space was filled with life, with the smell of wet clay, of glaze, and with the vibrant colors of her creations taking shape. Laura had found her passion again, and with it, she had found herself. The timid, fearful woman was gone, replaced by the confident artist who was now in control of her own life. She started taking small commissions, then opened an online shop. Her pieces, which carried within them a story of brokenness and rebirth, resonated with so many people. Lily changed, too. No longer living under a shadow of fear, she blossomed like a flower finally getting enough water and sun. She laughed more, talked more, and ran through the house with the carefree spirit of a child her age. Her favorite thing was to sit in her mom's studio, playing with little scraps of clay, making her own funny shapes. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with her laughter and the soft music Laura always played while she worked. As for me, I found my new place. I was no longer a mother on a rescue mission, but a grandmother and a companion. I helped Laura with Lily, tended the front garden, and spent hours reading in the peace we had fought so hard to win back. Sometimes, I would volunteer at the local library, sharing my love of books with a new generation. One late spring afternoon, about a year after the trial, I was sitting on the porch swing, watching Laura and Lily planting some lavender in the garden. The golden sunlight streamed down, making their blonde hair shine. Lily giggled as a butterfly fluttered around the new flowers. Laura looked up at me, a radiant smile on her face. A real smile, with no trace of strain. "Would you like some tea, Mom?" she asked. "I just made a batch of lemon cookies." "I would love that, honey," I replied. As she went inside, I watched her go. She had walked through a dark tunnel and come out the other side, stronger and more vibrant than ever. This house, once her prison, was now truly her sanctuary, a safe haven rebuilt on a foundation of love and resilience. I looked out at the garden, at the cream-colored roses in full bloom, at my little granddaughter playing. I realized then that the sweetest revenge wasn't the moment my enemies were punished. The sweetest revenge was this moment, right here, living a good, peaceful life, surrounded by the people I love, knowing I had fought to protect it. In my mind, a final narration played out, not with the anger and determination of before, but with a deep contentment. They say the best revenge is living well, but sometimes to get to that good life, you have to do some house cleaning yourself. And as a librarian, I can tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than putting everything back in its proper place. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt that everything in my small world was truly, finally, in its proper place. As the sun began to set, painting the garden in a honey gold light, Laura brought out a tray with tea and fragrant lemon cookies. We sat together on the porch, silently watching Lily try to catch the first fireflies of the season as they began to blink in the bushes. This peace was so precious. It wasn't the suffocating silence of fear, but the serene stillness of souls that had found their harbor. Watching my daughter and granddaughter, a stream of thoughts flowed through me. The ordeal we went through was like an earthquake, shaking the very foundations of our lives, but at the same time, it cracked open the hard, barren ground to allow new life to spring forth. And from that wreckage, I learned lessons deeper than any philosophy book I had ever read in the library. I learned that a mother's love isn't always gentle and protective. Sometimes, that love has to become a weapon. It has to become sharp, methodical, and, when necessary, ruthless. I had always thought my strength was in my patience, in my ability to comfort and listen. But this battle taught me that real strength also lies in the ability to act, to dare to confront the darkness, not just with your heart but with your mind. I had to set aside the image of the kind, gentle mother I had always cast myself as, and become a strategist, a warrior, and I don't regret it one bit, because to protect what is soft, you sometimes have to become as hard as steel. I also realized a painful truth about motherhood in the modern world. We expect women to be strong, to be multi-talented, to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, and successful in their careers all at once. But we often overlook the silent cracks in their souls. I was 1,000 miles away, and I accepted Laura's "I'm fine" far too easily, because I wanted to believe it. I had inadvertently become part of the silence that imprisoned her. This ordeal was a bitter reminder that being a mother isn't just about giving birth and raising children. It's about presence. It's the ability to see through the forced smiles to the pain beneath, to hear the unspoken words in the silence. Never assume that silence means peace. Sometimes, it is the most desperate cry for help. And perhaps the greatest lesson I learned was about the nature of justice and forgiveness. I began this fight with a burning desire for revenge. I wanted to see the Thompsons pay, to see them suffer as they had made my daughter suffer. And they did pay. But when I sat in that courtroom and witnessed their downfall, I didn't feel glee. Instead, I just felt a sense of emptiness, a tragic waste of human life. Revenge, when it's served, isn't as sweet as they say. It just leaves the bitter taste of ash. True healing didn't come from seeing my enemies punished. It came from within. It came from Laura finding her voice and her passion again. It came from Lily being able to laugh freely again. It came from us rebuilding this home together, not just with brick and mortar, but with trust and love. The justice of the court was only the beginning. Life's true justice is the ability to find joy and peace after the storm has passed. "Grandma, look!" Lily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She was holding up a small glass jar, and inside, a single firefly was blinking, creating a magical light in the twilight. "It's beautiful, sweetie." I smiled. I looked at her. This tiny, innocent being whose future had once been as fragile as the light of that firefly. We had fought not just to win back a house or some money. We had fought to protect that light, to give it the chance to shine brightly in this world. Laura came and sat down next to me on the swing. She rested her head on my shoulder, a familiar gesture I hadn't felt in so long. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I love you too, honey," I replied, putting my arm around her. We sat there, 3 generations of women, under the deepening night sky, surrounded by the scent of lavender and the blinking lights of fireflies. The quiet fire of revenge had been extinguished. Now, there was only the warm flame of family, a flame that would never go out, a flame to light our way forward. And I knew, no matter what the future held, we would face it together, because we had learned that the greatest strength isn't in never falling, but in always knowing how to help each other get back up. Thank you for listening to the whole story. If you are connected with it, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, drop a comment below with your thoughts or your own story. Let's keep the empathy and sharing going.